Negan says, is anybody worried about KCD2 bugs and glitches? Here's the reality, guys. If you're not a content creator, if you are not a streamer or a content creator, do not buy games on day one. Never. Never buy day one games. Never, ever, ever. Never. Do not buy games on day one. Unless you are a content creator whose livelihood depends on getting views and traffic and needing to be one of the first people covering a game because that's your job. I have to suffer through endless arrays of bugs and patches. Most of those things are not game breaking, but definitely glitchy, janky, buggy gameplay because it's my job. The most recent example of this would be Stalker 2. Absolutely fun time, great time playing that game. I put 60 hours into that game before they patched. I got a 63-hour playthrough out of that first experience. They patched the game when I was 3 hours away from the end. I played that game largely without any patches for my first experience. So, like, all of the balance patch shit didn't happen until I was basically done with the game. I didn't have any crashes and stuff, but there was texture flickering. There was pitch black darkness in places because the HD lighting wasn't working. Um, the easy mode, the story mode, was broken and wasn't working, so I was actually playing on a harder difficulty than I wanted to play. The economy was broken, so I wasn't able to upgrade any of my gear the way I was supposed to be able to upgrade my gear. It was a broken, buggy, hot mess. Still a great time. I had an absolutely fun experience, but I was 60 hours in before they launched their first patch. That's normal. Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of people seem to forget that Baldur's Gate 3, which won every single Game of the Year award ever, most awarded game of all time, had a first patch that launched roughly 1 month after the game launched, which had more than 1,000 fixes. That was a game that spent 3 years in early access. And even they, after 3 years of early access, even they had more than 1,000 bugs in their very first patch. So never, ever, ever play games on the first day if you can afford to wait. If you're just a normal gamer and you have other games that you can play, and you have a backlog on Epic and a backlog on Steam and a backlog on GOG and your Xbox and your PlayStation, all that stuff, just wait. You're not missing anything. There's no FOMO, right? The only reason you should be playing day one is if you're a streamer or a content creator, or you're trying to become a streamer and a content creator, and so you're trying to get content out when it's relevant. Everybody else, just wait. Just wait. Because there are always, 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 always going to be bugs that happen at launch. And the reason for that is simple. Games are complex. And especially if a company has opted to not have an early access, again, Baldur's Gate 3, 3 years of early access, they still had 1,000 bugs once the game got out into the wild. And the reason for that is because no matter how good you are, no matter how big your team is, no matter how much money you have, you cannot account for the millions of permutations of chipsets, GPU sets, RAM types, amount of RAM, hardware that people have, the software people are running. You cannot account for all of that. Even with consoles, which are far better to balance because most people are running the same machines, people run different controllers. People have off-market controllers in some cases. There are all of these things that affect the optimization and performance across the millions of devices that people are going to be playing these games on. And a company, no matter how big they are, no matter how much money they are, they cannot account for everything, especially if they are not doing an early access. So, is KCD2 going to have bugs? Absolutely, it's going to have bugs. They have not done an early access. Now, they are fairly confident in their product so far. But if you've watched the developer streams, even the developer streams they were playing through in the last part of the last year, they were running a build from August which still had bugs in it. Um, they just shipped the review version of the game like last week, and people are playing through that right now. And I guarantee you there will be a day one patch. But let's just say, for example, let's say they send out 1,000 review codes. That's 1,000 people playing the game. Awesome. They're going to find 350 bugs from 1,000 people playing. The game goes live. Suddenly that game goes out to 3 million people, 4 million people, 5 million people. I don't know what the sales are going to be like on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. But the moment the game goes out to millions of players, that's when the bug reports start coming in. And that's when we start finding out that, oh, the 4090 GTX with the chipset, blah, 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 and the AMD processor and this type of RAM and all of that's bugged. And you've got 70,000 people who have that combination. So 70,000 players are going to have that bug. And then here's these people over here trying to play with a 17-year-old potato that's running an Intel chipset driver and doesn't even have a GPU. And they're having these issues. And this person over here is using some $20 controller they bought off of eBay that doesn't work. The driver chipset doesn't jive, and so their controller won't work, and that's causing fatal crashes, blah, 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 blah. The moment a game goes live and it's out there in the hands of millions of players, there are now millions and millions of bug reports flowing in. And the company has to sort through that. It doesn't matter who the company is, how big the company is. That is the reality of launching these massive games, these complex beasts in the current age we live in. And it always drives me nuts when people are like, oh, games used to launch in such a perfect state back in 1992. Yeah, when the game was 75 kilobytes, whatever the KB, I forget what KB stands for now. My brain is frying down. Um, Back when games came on little 3.5-inch discs, and you had two discs to put in the drive, yeah, games used to be a lot simpler because there was 25 lines of code. Now there are 25 million lines of code. So, you can't compare. Um, and all games launch buggy. Yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 is the perfect example of a game that had a really buggy launch, and then they spent 2 years getting Cyberpunk 2.0 out the door. 2.0 came out, completely different game. Absolutely amazing experience in 2.0 versus the launch version of the game. Phantom Liberty, one of the best expansions I've ever played. But that's a perfect example of a super complex game that launched with horrible amounts of bugs. No Man's Sky, that's another great example. How's it going? That's another great example. No Man's Sky. Here we are 9 years later. No Man's Sky has completely changed around. I remember reading like 2 months ago, I think it was after Worlds Part 2, they have finally on Steam gone to a overwhelmingly positive rating after like 8 years of that game bombing when it came out. Um, so every game that launches from Baldur's Gate 3 to No Man's Sky to Cyberpunk 2072, yes, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It will absolutely launch with bugs. So I'm going to clip this out because that was a great little discussion point this morning. You should not be playing games on day one unless you're a content creator. Because if you get triggered by bugs and you're someone who's like, I'm not going to play this buggy hot mess, I'm going to wait 2 months until the game gets patched, then wait. Just wait. Don't be one of those people who goes on the internet and bitches and goes on Reddit and throws a hissy fit about how, oh, the game launched and it has all these bugs. Yeah, that's how games launch these days. That's the way the cookie crumbles. That's the nature of game development. It's the nature of gaming in the modern era. These are complex machines. They are never going to be flawless. Do you know how many billions of dollars? Look at SpaceX. Do you know how many billions of dollars they have spent sending up rockets that exploded before they started getting the rockets that could actually go back and then come back and safely land on their own? The equations and the programming to make that happen with the millions of variables, the company was willing to spend billions of dollars to get through and go through the iterations of blowing up rocket after rocket after rocket after rocket after rocket after rocket to get it right. Billions of dollars. Game development is a similarly complex beast in terms of programming and coding because of all the variations of chipsets and GPU sets and everything else. Companies don't have billions of dollars to spend iterating over 20 years to get it right. They get it good enough, then they launch it, and then they fix what they need to fix to get it working as good as possible. But even then, I guarantee you'll find people today who are playing No Man's Sky who are still suffering crashes because of X, Y, or Z reasons. And they're out there ranting on the internet about how, No Man's Sky is this horrible piece of trash game, blah 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 blah. Eh. Don't buy games on day one if you're someone who's going to bitch and moan about bugs. Just wait. Unless you're a content creator, and then you have to do it. Because I will be suffering through whatever bugs are out there on day one.